So, good morning everybody. Time for this morning's Dhamma talk. And I did promise, and I will keep the promise, to give a talk on the thousand-petal lotus simile. And I do this even though you may have heard it before, you probably have. As I often say, I've heard it more times than you have. And it's such a beautiful simile, and it makes some points about meditation, which I really do need to share with you. And the thousand-petal lotus simile, okay, some people say that was a simile from Vajrayana Buddhism, mostly. But nevertheless, it applies to any type of meditation. It shows one of the wonderful ways of looking at meditation and how it works. And today I'm going to say it in full. So a lotus flower is well known in Buddhist circles. It's a symbol of Buddhism. And it's used in many, many similes. And the simile which, I'm going to use it today, is just how a lotus flower opens up. And a lotus flower is closed at night time. There's always some lotuses somewhere wherever you go in Buddhist monasteries over the world. Even here, you can see there's two lotuses in the bottom and a little glass lotus on the next layer there. Lotuses have always got their place of reverence in Buddhism. And one of the reasons is that at night time the lotus is closed up. And if you examine that closed up lotus, these outermost petals have to withstand the weather, which can be windy, it can be dusty, it can be really storms. So it has to be a protective layer. The outermost petal is always thick. And if you look closely at it, it's always like corrugated to give it extra strength. And you may have seen that many, many times. And I do remember the first time I saw one of these outermost petals of the lotus with the flowers inside somewhere. You could never imagine that on this coarse, rough, outermost petal, inside of that was these incredibly beautiful, profound, thin, fragrant inner layers of petals. It was just kind of, how can something so beautifully be seen, be imagined inside when all you see is the outermost layer of petals? But you've all lived long enough now that you can see that inside of what's really rough on the outside be something really beautiful. And that's where I pause for some of those first similes. I did mention about that guy who came on his first retreat, first 9-day retreat, and got into a jhana. How on earth can that happen when, has hardly got any instructions or experience? And the point is, inside each one of you is also, those jhanas are there. It's like the inside, of the lotus. It just needs to open up the lotus, and inside are these beautiful states of mind in each one of you. Like you're a human being, right? A lotus. It's always got these beautiful petals inside. And the job of a meditation retreat is to teach you how that lotus flower opens. And even if you haven't meditated much at all before, when you know that jhana is kind of inside, it's a nice metaphor, a nice way of looking at it, it can be done. And my job is to convince you it can be done and point out the obstacles which stop it happening, so you can avoid those obstacles. So first of all, it can be done. How is it done? And of course, we always make it far too complicated. And I'm at fault there. We give so many talks write so many books. And that's why that old saying of the Zen master years and years ago, couldn't speak any English at first, and went for a tour around England. When he came back again, someone asked him, "What do you think of Buddhism in UK?" And he replied, "Buddhism, Buddhism, Buddhism. Books, books, books. Too many, too many, too many. Dustbin, dustbin, dustbin." It's very eloquent. And even though I've written many books, I always feel that sometimes there's too many written, not enough really sort of investigated and practiced. That's what he was meaning. But then again he said, and this makes me very embarrassed, he said, anyone who writes a book on Buddhism has to spend the next 7 lifetimes as a donkey. So if once I pass away, if you see a donkey, please give them some tea with condensed milk. There's a baked beans in the morning. And he's got a point there, but if you don't read some of the books which I've written, you read somebody else's books. We read books, we devour information, and sometimes that's what makes it complicated. But it's very, very simple. Once you understand the simile of the lotus, it kind of makes it really simple. Why does the lotus flower open up? It's because the sun rises. And once the sun rises, the light and the warmth of the sun can hit the outermost petals of the lotus. And it's just nature, cause and effect. The lotus doesn't decide to open up. It just opens because that's its causes and conditions, that's its nature. And that's what happens to each one of you. The light stands for mindfulness, and the warmth stands for kindness. And you do need both. So if you're aware, but not kind, the things don't really open up properly. When there's that kindness, that warmth, I open the door of my heart no matter what happens, unconditional, aware, and that kindness and awareness opens out those petals. And so, what does that mean, opening up those petals? It's one of the reasons why when you first sit down and close your eyes, or even before you close your eyes, you're always aware of the body before you're aware of the mind, because this is basically where you live. If you are going to investigate your mind, even if you're going to read a book, even if you're going to do some experiment, even if you're going to investigate the world, first of all, you have a body. You've got to make sure you can sit it down and have some peace from the world, so you can focus on these deeper understandings of nature. And I remember somebody once described it like this, and I thought it was very useful. If you own a car and you're going to some university, or you're going to work, or you're going to a temple, you must park your car in a safe place. And once you've parked your car in a safe place, you must make sure that there's nothing which is visible through the windows, like your purse or a wallet or something, because that will attract somebody to actually break the window and steal your possessions. You have to make sure it's parked in a safe place so no one's going to hit it. You have to make sure that it's locked and the brakes are on. I remember years ago, the old post office in Byford was on the Southwest Highway. And we just parked in there to go and get some stamps or something to post a letter or a parcel. And somebody ran into the post office and said, does anyone own that big white car? And that was our car, the monastery car. You better go out because it's rolling down the hill. The driver forgot to put the brakes on. And we never realized that there was actually quite a gradient there. And so I remember, in those days, I was thinner, more fit, and I ran after it. So running down the Southwest Highway after the car, I managed to open the door and put the brakes on. And very, very lucky. It wasn't a busy time of the day. And you know, I never told Ajahn Brahm about that at all. But from that day on, we always made sure the brakes were on. Or even worse than that, I remember I don't think you mind me telling you, like Amandas. No, it wasn't Amandas, actually it was one of the other Anagarikas. This particular Anagarika, he decided he wanted to, I didn't have time to get a proper lunch, so he wanted to take me out to this shop in Northbridge. If you know Northbridge and Newcastle Street, it has, at night time it's one of the rough parts of Perth, and we found a nice parking spot, and so we went out for lunch, just in one of the restaurants or cafes there, and then just as we were finishing off our lunch, he said, oh my goodness, I can't find the keys, I must have dropped the keys somewhere. And this was in a place where you don't want to lose the keys of a car, so we said, let's see where they are. And he couldn't find them, so he went out to the car, which is on the opposite side of the road. And the car was still there, which was good. And the doors were open. And the keys, I found them very quickly. They were in the ignition. Yeah. Anyone could have got into that car, and the keys were already there, and driven it away.
The engine was still running.
Yeah, the engine was running as well, yeah. You remember it more than I do. But I thought, that was really lucky. And there was a lot of rough people in that area. Ooh. But the food was good. Were you there at the time?
Yeah, I was there.
Okay, it wasn't you though. It was, don't say who it was,
You introduced me to blood pudding or whatever it is. That one in England.
Oh, no, it wasn't there, was it?
Yeah.
The, what's it called? Not blood pudding. It's... Yeah, I know what it is, yeah. I'm embarrassed to say. And anyhow, but the fact that the car wasn't taken was incredible. But you never do that, if you want to actually to get a good trip back, and you want to actually be able to buy another car later on, and the committee in town would actually give you that permission. If they found out how we treated that particular car, we would never be allowed to. And maybe get a bicycle in the future, but not a car. But anyhow, so you have to park your car safely, lock it up, and it's going to be there for you, when the meal or the talk or the business is over. And that's like the simile I use for the body. So I know that in meditation, this layer of petals called the body is going to disappear. So I've got to make sure it's nice and safe. I have mentioned that in passing. Many people feel fear when they're meditating. And of course, there is a reason for that. Because when you're sitting sort of cross-legs, you close your eyes, and you don't listen to anything. Your job is to go deep inside. So it's as if all your security devices are turned off. Like having a house, if no one's going to stay in there for a week because you're off on a retreat, you've got to make sure it's nice and safe, everything is locked, security alarms are on, or whatever it is you need to make sure it is safe. And if it is safe, then once your business is finished, you go back and your car is there, your body is there. So you're parking your car in this hall, parking your body here. You want to make sure that once you come out of your meditation, everything is nice and safe. That's one of the reasons why, knowing that people who come in here are all sort of good people, meritorious people, people who don't want to steal, people who don't want to harm or hurt you. That is important for you to know. In all those years which I have been teaching meditation, which is a lot, no one has ever been abused or hurt or things stolen. In fact, this whole time, because people who come on retreat, they know the importance of making sure everybody feels safe. So that's one of the first ways you have to be careful if you want to make sure the outermost petals of the lotus can open up. It is mindfulness, it is kindness, but the kindness is also including this gentleness, this goodness, which you know that you're safe. And then, after a while, just when you are mindful of even parts of the body, parts of the outermost petal, it really is. Now, I've had so many experiences where you have been in pain or an ache or a difficulty, and you use that mindfulness and kindness, and the things which really shouldn't disappear do disappear. I mean, illnesses or sicknesses or pains. And I think I did mention one of the first times that happened to me. It was, again, just in the old days we used to use the word blow my mind. It was a really bad toothache, no medication, nothing I knew to get rid of this pain which was stopping me sleeping, until eventually, I'm doing this quickly because I did mention this story before, I said, well, nothing else to do, let's let go. And you've heard those words so many times. I had heard those words hundreds of times. But then you had to do it because you had no choice. And that was magnificent. You know, you just a word or a couple of words. No medications, no sort of massaging something, or no sort of exercising this or changing that. Just that thought, let it go. And then the pain did go. It's kind of like miraculous. But then it wasn't a miracle, it was just me being there late at night. And to see that happening, and this was not imagining things, showed me just how, even with disturbances in the body, with that degree of kindness, and I said yesterday that letting go is kindness, with that kindness, even disturbances and pain can vanish. And then once the body relaxes, it's like it's not any business for you anymore. You don't have to do anything. You just leave it alone. So you're not worrying about anything. I've got to move my foot here, move my foot there. I better go see a doctor about that. Maybe I need some more medication. Let's ask if Christina has got any medication which can get rid of this ache or pain. It'd be wonderful if somebody invented some brain medication. So if you're thinking about something which you don't like, you just rub a little bit on your, and then the thoughts vanish. However, no one's invented any of that yet, and you don't need it anyway. So once the body settles, you don't have any problems or businesses to worry about with your body. You know, your body's going to be safe. You can leave it alone. You parked it, locked it up, and it's going to be there for you when you finish the rest of the meditation. The outermost petals of the lotus have opened up. And then the petals inside, they always start to, I like to mention about things of the mind, or your thoughts. So one of the things which I teach, and it's valid, and which is important, the next thing we have to go inside of, like the outermost petals, have gone, the body, and then the next layer of petals is usually time. You're worried about what's going to happen next. You're worried about what happened earlier. And I know that every sort of spiritual teacher talks about, letting go of the past and the future. How do you do that? And how you do that is just, again, like this layer of petals called time. In order to go inside, you just practice awareness and kindness, especially the kindness. I have mentioned this in passing, but you go in more detail now. Be kind to your past. How do you do that? Give it more detail. If, you're really fed up with what someone did to you, how they treated you really badly, how they even abused you, how can you be kind to that? How you be kind to that, first of all, is you look at how your brain has been working, reflecting or remembering this past event. Most people remember those past traumas, the painful things happened to you, like a prosecutor at a trial. It may be, my teacher at school. He didn't understand me. He's always been sort of cruel to other children. He shouldn't be cruel. As a teacher, they don't understand that children are just sensitive and they're just learning. They do make mistakes. Yeah, okay, so I made a mistake by blowing up the classroom. I didn't mean it was just a mistake. So how about being kind to your prosecutors? That's how they've been trained. That's what's expected of them by the principle. So you can't really sort of be too upset at them. I mentioned the word principle. There's this mother had trouble with her son when he went to school. He wouldn't get up in time to go to school. So she had to go to his bedroom and say, "Son, it's time to go to school." "But Mummy, I'm fed up with school. I don't want to go to school." "But you have to go to school, son." "No, I don't. You must go to school." "Why, Mummy? Give me one good reason why I should go to school." You know the punchline, don't you? Because you're the principal. Good, you got that. Even principals don't like going to school. Ask them. So anyway, so you're kind. You see, that person who hurts you side of the story. And you're kind. Now, why did that happen? You're kind to yourself if you made a mistake. We do make mistakes. And if you make mistakes, instead of thinking you're a bad person, you think that's just a bad thing I did, which doesn't make you a bad person. Just up the road at Carnot Prison Farm. Are they still there? Maybe, I haven't been up to Carnot Prison Farm for years, but people said there was this one guy over there. They read that story, some of my stories about the two bad bricks. You just made two bad bricks. It doesn't mean it's a bad wall. It's just two of the bricks are crooked. And that really got to him. And he really appreciated that. And he was going around the prison farm saying, "It was only 2 murders. It doesn't make me a murderer." He's got a point. So he doesn't need to murder again, which is a good relief. But this is when we're kind to our past. Imagine you have done one of those acts and you're put in jail for it. How do you think you feel? That it's as if everybody defines you by those 1 or 2 stupid things you did. Another story is coming up. And I love this story, and it's relevant to here. Because on one of these retreats, years ago, the usual cook for the 9-day retreat, her partner, who used to help out enormously, was diagnosed with leukemia. And she said, "Well, I've got to look after him, so I cannot be your cook on this retreat." So I was put in a position, only a week or 2 before the retreat was to start, there was no cook. And I had a kind of a nice insight. And so I found the cook. And he's an amazing cook. His name, I shouldn't really say his name. Okay, well, Carl. And he was a brilliant cook. I couldn't believe how hard he worked, and the quality of his food was amazing. I remember just checking in on him, making sure everything was okay. And he used to make these pizzas. Come in the morning and do it from scratch, just the bread and the toppings on top. And that was, wow, you're so efficient and work so hard. And everybody appreciated his food. What happened on the last day of the retreat, like often what we do here on the last day, we send all our kindness and gratitude to the people who've looked after us. And so we're all about to say thank you to Carl for his cooking, but he wasn't there. And they asked me, where's Carl gone? Why is he not here today? And I said, because he's gone back to the prison. He was on work release. That kind of shocked them. There was a prisoner who was allowed to come here and cook for everybody. And I said, what was he in for? I said, rape. And people's eyes went wide. Ajahn Brahm, you let a convicted rapist come to Jhana Grove on retreat to cook for us? Yes. And they say he did that offence when he was young on drugs. He's been in jail for quite a few years, and I trust him now. He's learned, he's done his time, he's learned from his mistakes. I trust him so much. And of course, they all saw him. They didn't know what he was doing here, why he was here. And that was one of the lovely teachings of that retreat. Just because you did something wrong when you were really young or years ago, does that make you who you are today? Or have you grown from that, learned from that, and become a much better person? And that was a Carl. And that's a wonderful teaching. Everybody got that. So they can be much more forgiving and let go of the past. What have you done in the past? Did I ask you what you have done in the past before we let you come on this retreat? I don't care what you've done in the past, it's what you're doing now that matters. So when you're kind, forgive your past and other people's past. It's this other big, huge amount of problems and work you can let go of. So you can meditate here. You don't see your mind going to the past. Now when I go home, how can I sort that one out? What can I do to make sure that person never comes to my house ever again, or does this, does that? How can I make sure that no one finds out what I did? All of that stuff can disappear. When you're kind to all the people who actually contributed to your past. Any of you who've been mistreated by your parents, I don't really understand that, because my mum and dad, they were legitimately good. Sometimes I think back and say, were your parents really that good? No, isn't there something you're in denial of? And I keep on thinking, nothing. They were really good, kind people. But some of you haven't been so lucky. But often you find your parents were trying their best for what they could understand. And you may think that best was not much, but they were having difficult times too. So when you're kind, it makes it so much more easy to forgive. And when you can forgive, it means you can let go. And when you let go, you have freedom. Your petals open up. You can go inside. And of course, freedom for the future as well. If you're kind to the future. When people worry about the future, they worry about all the things which can go wrong. And my favourite story about that, by the great English philosopher, W.T. Pooh. Winnie the Pooh. walking with little Piglet. Piglet was very small, and small people usually get very anxious. And there's a big storm coming, and the trees were swaying backwards and forwards, and twigs were falling off, branches were falling off, even trees were coming down. And little Piglet got so scared, and he couldn't go on any further. He held on to Winnie the Pooh's paw and said, "Pooh, Pooh, Pooh, I don't think I can go any further. I'm so scared. What would happen if a tree fell when we were underneath it?" That's thinking about the future and adding something negative. And the antidote to that is thinking of the future and thinking something positive. So Winnie the Pooh said, yeah, what would happen if a tree fell when we weren't underneath it? Which is far more likely. And that was enough. That positive kindness to the future meant they could walk back home without any problem. When we think of the future, why is it always negative? And a good example of that, remember when we had, was it bird flu epidemic or some of these other epidemics? I remember I was flying to Singapore to give a talk in Suntec City, 4,000 or 5,000 people per night. And I remember the organising committee, I saw it even on the Straits Times newspaper on the aircraft going from Perth to Singapore on this crisis. Was it bird flu or SARS? I think SARS. They had on the front page of the newspaper in big black letters, always put the bad news in black letters, 99 people were confirmed with SARS in Singapore, and the government had closed all the schools and asked people not to meet together, not to have public gatherings. And I was giving a big talk that night. So the organising committee were at the gate, not to welcome me, but to ask me to go back to Perth. And they said, I don't think we should go ahead. You know, 99 people already got SARS. What should we do? And my response was, what's the population of Singapore? And they said, I think they said at that time, 4 million. So that means 3,999,901 people haven't got SARS. Let's go ahead. When I put it that way, it kind of made it sound different. 99 people have got SARS. Almost 4 million haven't got SARS. That's pretty good odds. And anyway, I said, SARS was a respiratory disease. What's a lovely way of overcoming or protecting yourself from respiratory disease? One of the best ways is to exercise your lungs. So I promise I'll tell many new jokes, so many people laugh, and that's a lot of good exercises so they won't get SARS. To me, that's being kind to the future, being positive about what the future might be. And that's actually how you let go of the future. They went ahead, and it was a very lovely time. I don't know why people get so afraid. So I always look for something positive. If I get COVID, and sometimes during the COVID times, I was actually feeling really disappointed I wasn't getting COVID. And honestly, I'm disappointed I never got COVID. Because some of the other monks who got COVID, they actually were off on retreat for 2 weeks. They had a wonderful time. I had to work. But when you're kind, sometimes the future is not so heavy. And it's also when you're kind to the present moment. Oh, come on, look, you're in Jhana Grove. You're on retreat. You've got nothing to do. Many of you, if you were at home, you'd have some work to do. At the very least, you'd have to clean your house. You have to cook for your husband and your kids. Hey, you don't have to do anything. Freedom. I was going to say you have to go to work, but it's Easter Monday today, so even ordinary people don't go to work, but tomorrow I'll remind you. If you weren't here, you'd have to get in the car and go to work and get stuck in the traffic and see your boss and oh crikey. So it's wonderful in Jhana growth. Be kind to this moment. And if you're kind to this moment, it's very easy to stay in the moment. The moment becomes beautiful. Whatever you're kind to is very joyful. And even if you are sick, there's a lot of people who are getting on in years here. What's the average age of society? You're much older than normal, aren't you? I don't know why we always get elderly people on these retreats. Very few times we get young people on these retreats. I reckon it's because you guys, I'm getting old, I'm going to get sick, I'm going to die. So you want to make sure you get enlightened quickly. You haven't got much time left now. So, when you're kind to the present moment, it's easy to stay here. Look, I still remember my mother, when I was a kid, that I loved playing soccer. It was a poor family, nothing much else to do. So I was out in the street playing soccer all the time. And of course, playing soccer, you go for tackles, and sometimes you fall on the ground, and the ground was just bitumen, like on the road, or the pavement, which was stone. And of course, you'd hit your knees, and you scrape the skin off your knees, and blood would come out. And so often I remember just growing up with scabs on both knees, just simply because you were playing soccer all the time. And I would cry, I'd run to my mummy. You know what my mother would do? She'd bend down and she'd kiss the knee. And she always used to call it kissing it better. Now imagine if you were a nurse or a doctor and knew what was really going on. She was putting her mouth with all the bacteria and bugs on. We didn't actually brush your teeth that often. All those bugs on an open wound. It never hurt. It never got infected. And it always, as soon as she did that kiss, the pain went away. Then I was out there playing soccer again. I thought it was, most of the time she didn't even put a Band-Aid on it. And I was fine. That's all I needed. A bit of kindness and love. So sometimes, unfortunately I can't do this because it's against my Vinaya. But if any of you fall over and have a bump, sometimes I thought, kiss it better. I get into big trouble for that. But that kindness actually works. Mindfulness and kindness kind of connects you to this moment. So this layer of petals called time opens up naturally. You go into this present moment. You don't do it through willpower. It just happens naturally through kindness and mindfulness. You're here and enjoying this moment. It makes this moment much more beautiful. And the next thing, which I always say to do, is that this is establishing that mindfulness in this present moment, is to be silent. And again, how can you be silent? There was this monk. There's a couple of stories there. Now I'll do this monk story. And he ordained in a Christian monastery, which was really tough. They had this rule: you are only allowed to speak one sentence every 7 years. Could you do that? So it was 6 years, 11 months and 30 days. Tomorrow was the big day. He can say his first sentence to the head monk. And so he hardly slept all night because he was thinking something profound to say. And so when he went to the abbot's quarters, he was so excited. First time he'd spoken in 7 years. And so he had a good idea what he was going to say, but what he wanted to say never came out. Instead he said, "You make us work too hard in this monastery." Is that what you'd say at Dhammasara? But he couldn't actually say anything else. He had one sentence, he had to wait for another 7 years before he could correct himself. He was really depressed. So he went back and he practiced, and after 13 years, 11 months and 30 days, the next chance he could actually say something. And he had something much more profound to say, it's much more settled. But again, what came out was not what he meant to say. What he actually said was, "The food here is terrible." So, 20 years, 30 days. Sorry, 11 months and 30 days. Tomorrow was his third chance to say something. And this time, he actually said what he meant to say. He told the abbot, "I can't stand this place any longer, I'm leaving." You know what the abbot said? "Very good, you've done nothing but complain ever since you came here." Because that's actually, what you say is one thing, but what you're thinking all the time is something totally different. What are you thinking about? Just because people can't hear you, maybe they can hear you. You've always got to be careful around senior monks and nuns. Maybe they can read your mind. Are you ready for it to be read? Really? You don't have to be worried about that, because any monks or nuns who can read your mind, reading your mind will be reading Pulp Fiction. You get bored after the first paragraph. So, we're not going to read minds, but sometimes to be silent. After a while, as a monk or a nun or a meditator, you find all these words you say, they're just so silly and stupid. And actually, they destroy the beauty of silence. I often notice in basically most religious or spiritual places, silence is respected. You go to places and it's quiet there. I still remember, as a young man, if I had any business to do in London, especially I remember doing visas to get to Thailand, I would always, after doing all that business, my little refuge, there was no Buddhist temples there which I knew of, was to go into Westminster Abbey. It was huge. There had so many little places and little chapels. Many of those were absolutely quiet. No one went there. And so I'd always find a nice quiet little place I could just sit down and meditate. And the last time I went in there, I was really so disappointed. They had installed a PA system, and there was constant announcements, ads for the next sermon, or who was coming to visit, or please don't leave bags unattended, or whatever else it was. It was like a sacrilege. I was a Buddhist, but I enjoyed the silence, which before that time was actually celebrated in these places. But now they destroyed the silence. And I went out really disappointed. Silence is important. And so please respect that wherever you see it. And be kind to the silence. It's like a little flower which is growing in some unexpected place. And you're really kind to it. Make sure it's protected, has enough water so it can go stronger and stronger and stronger. There's far too much noise in the world. And so when we have that kindness to silence, what do you think grows? Silence becomes kind of natural. So when I sit in here, I don't think what I'm going to meditate on. I just stop thinking. Don't give anything words. Learn how to let things disappear, including descriptions. I've said that so many times, that why do you want to keep experiences, like taking photographs of them? Or like trying to take notes of what happened. Just leave them be. So the silence is what remains. And silence is incredibly beautiful. And we're very fortunate to be in a country like Australia. It's so huge. And you come out here, you've got the birds chirping outside. But in the afternoon, when nothing's going on, you can have a walk even within Jhana grove or out in the forest surrounding it. There's hardly any sounds at all. Even the animals, the kangaroos are usually asleep during the day. But then if you do hear them, they're very quiet. Nothing makes a noise. And you can appreciate that. I do recall just with silence. One of my best experiences of silence is when I went to visit my family over in the UK. I've been a monk for about 7 years. And they just managed, maybe a bit longer, they just managed to get the first monastery over in the UK, in Chithurst. And because I was just a visitor, I had no duties. I went to visit my family at Christmas. And so I had nothing to do. And one morning, it was very cold outside, but I had nothing to do, so it's okay if I just go for a walk outside. Yeah, sure, if you can survive. Because it was minus 26 degrees. A very big cold spell. Minus 26, that's cold. I know it was that temperature because they showed me a copy of the newspaper the following day. And the headlines were, "Even the beer froze." Okay, that's journalism in UK. But I put on scarves and boots and hats and stuff, and off I went out trudging in the snow in the forest. It's the most wonderful things I've ever done. It was absolutely freezing. And minus 26 degrees is cold. But when I went out there, no one else was around. Any sane person was inside in front of a fire somewhere. Only idiots like me were out there in the snow. But it wasn't just no one. It really was. No animals were around. No birds were in the sky. There was no little squirrels rustling around in the base of the forest. No cars were out because the snow was so thick. There was no aircraft around because all the airports were closed. No human beings, just me. And that was magic. When I stopped walking and crushing the snow, everything stopped. Here you can hear the kind of birds. In that situation, you could hear nothing. Everything, the whole universe stopped. That was a kind of like spiritual experience. I love that. Simply because it was so rare to experience silence so deep. I only sort of trudged back to the monastery just because I was freezing, literally. So I got back and I survived. But I'll never forget those experiences of total silence. I respect it so much, and so whenever you get a little bit of silence in the mind, when that layer of petals of like noise, words, descriptions opens up, you see silence. My mind is just so kind to that because it respects it. And you're aware of it and it stays. You don't have to say anything. You can't say anything. To say something is like really desecrating it. It's really impolite to the beauty of silence. So you start to really value the silence. And already you're in a beautiful layer of petals. The deeper you go into the lotus, the more beautiful are the markings on those petals. And the more fragrant it is. You haven't done this on purpose, it's just what happens. And then when you're in that silence, the next thing which happens, you don't need to decide to do this. You're just in this moment aware and warm towards this beautiful thing which you are aware of. It becomes your object of meditation. The layer of petals which is so gorgeous, that's why you don't wander off anywhere, it's just, it grabs your attention every time. And then in that silence, the next thing which usually you are aware of, certainly this is how it happens to me, is your breathing. But it's not an ordinary breath. It's always a really delightful breath, very sweet breath, a very sort of tasty breath, if you like. And I used to call it, it's hard to find names, that's why in the old days I used to call it the beautiful breath. And you don't need to focus, I've got to focus on the breath, I can't miss the breath. It grabs you, because how gorgeous these layer of petals are. And it's natural to be kind, be warm towards what you're aware of, and the mindfulness is so easy. So you have the breath there, this gorgeous breath. No effort required. You're just mindful and kind, that's all. You're opening the door of your heart, which is very easy to open to this beautiful silence. But all these states, all these petals, they don't last. They don't there forever. They too open up. And that's where you see this beautiful breath. You don't need to do anything, please. Just leave it. Just enjoy. Mindful, warm to it. And then that opens up. And when the beautiful breath or the delightful breath, the nice and soft, easy, when that opens up, the next thing which you notice, you don't ask for it, you don't want it, you don't not want it. It's this beautiful light, the nimitta. It's inside of the breath. It's a good way of looking at it. Once the breath opens, there's a beautiful light. Wow. But don't say wow, please. You say wow, it all closes up again. And you're watching this light, and again it's effortless. It's just there. And always just kind and aware. Sometimes that's where one of the reasons I wanted to mention this today. Sometimes you have like a light and you're watching the breath as well, and you wonder, what should I be? Am I supposed to watch the breath? So you see this beautiful light start to come. No, I can't watch the light, I've got to keep with the breath. Otherwise I'm missing the path. No, keep it natural. Let your mind decide what to do. Your mind knows what to do. Sometimes you're watching the beautiful breath and you see the light. The mind gets attracted towards the light, but then, it closes up and then you just go back to the breath. Fine. Keep on going. Whatever's in front of your mind right now is the most important object. And eventually what happens is it opens up and you go inside of the breath and you see this beautiful light. That's the nature of these things. And after a while, the light remains and the breath goes way over there somewhere. And you can hardly perceive it. You've got this beautiful light which you're watching naturally. We're not finished yet. This is just the beginning. You just keep your awareness and your kindness watching this beautiful light, being really kind to it. And what do you think happens next? You go into the nimitta. You're always going inside to the next meditation experience. You never go on to the next meditation object. You never, okay, here I'm in now I've got to go over here to a nimitta, now I've got to go here to something else. You always go inside of it. Just like when you're zooming in, is the word I like to use. Just like on Google Maps, you zoom in, you get closer to the destination which you're looking at, and you go inside of that, and inside of that, and inside of that. And that's the path of meditation, always going inside. That's why sometimes people call it samatha meditation. I call it insight meditation. With a D, not a T. Inside meditation. Always going inside. And as you go into this beautiful nimittas, then the deeper you go into the lotus, the more beautiful it is. The more fragrant, the more profound. And inside this beautiful nimitta you think, well, it doesn't get better than this. You're just starting. And inside of that nimitta you see the jhana. It's like right in the center. And that's your mind. First part of the mind. And that just blows you away. I know sometimes people say, well, in the jhana you got this, that and that and that. So should I get this object and that object? Look, if it really is that territory, you can't decide what to do. You can't sort of name things. You're going past that naming things and deciding things. You just almost get sort of unable to speak, unable to think, which is one of the reasons why when you're in these states or getting close to them, leave off trying to decide where you are and what to do next. That's a disturbance. Just see what happens next. Be kind, be mindful. Actually, that was the wrong advice. Don't see what's coming next. See what's happening now. There is no next in these states. And as you go deeper inside, then you're enjoying yourself. Leave all those assessments till after, when you start coming out. And then you can decide, where, how far, how deep you got. So you see this beautiful first jhana. Whoa. And after a while, out of kindness, out of joy, out of basically mindfulness and kindness, you go inside the first jhana. And inside the first jhana, that's called the second jhana. And after a while, you stay there and you go, like the coarser parts on the outside fade away. And you go deeper inside that. And that, when you come out afterwards, you look, wow, that was amazing. What on earth was that? And you find that's the third or a fourth. You go deeper and deeper in. And these become amazing states. I always like saying, the second jhana, as you're going in, afterwards, when you come out afterwards, you notice the most amazing thing which disappeared was your will. Sometimes people celebrate and attach to being able to do things. That's why many of you do too much. You think you're doing something good for the world. You're just disturbing yourself. In the second jhana, that will vanishes and you realize just how disturbing it is. And then you go deeper into that, and there's some of these so-called happinesses disappear. They get much more refined. And in the fourth, you're just totally content, totally still. And you notice that that is the thing which you were aware of. You say, what was the object of your meditation? You only ask that question when you emerge from these meditations. And to come out, you have to go backwards again. From the fourth into the third, third into the second, second to the first into nimittas, and nimittas quite quickly into breath and stuff as your mind starts to, and body starts to turn off, on again. You're going deep into the lotus. And you imagine just how beautiful it is, but not just beautiful. How much insight you get by going deep inside yourself and seeing, what is really essential and what vanishes. So much of you which you thought was really important. Even things like your age. And you're concerned, how many years have I got left? I can get sicker and die. That all vanishes. Because the mind is something totally separate from your body. You know what dying is. You never said be afraid of it ever again. And also, yeah, it's kind of important, but not that much. And you know how to disappear. You know what Ajahn Brahm meant. There's nothing. There's nothing. And that becomes a simile of the lotus flower. It's now 9 o'clock. I've kept it to time. But I'm now going to go over time. So I remember one of these anecdotes. I remember giving that little simile in brief years ago when I was in Sri Lanka. And that was to the president, Rajapaksa. And he said, he ordered his aides, let Ajahn Brahm teach that on TV tonight. So I had to go do a TV show. And they said to me, it's not like here, well, I can go over time. He said, there, if you go a minute over time, we'll cut you off. There's another program coming on afterwards. He said, you have to go perfectly to time. And that was really nice. Because you told yourself that, I've got to keep to the time. It just went really perfectly. And when I finished, got to that last piece, which I just told you, then cut. I am amazed at the mind. It's not my mind. You tell it what to do, and you're kind to it, and it behaves. And that was really, I loved that talk. It was very helpful also, because in those days I was just flying economy and I wasn't that well known. But the guy who was doing my visa, or checking my passport, he said, oh, you're the monk who gave that talk tonight. It's a very nice talk. Stamp, out you go. There are some benefits. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Simile 1,000-petal lotus. 2 things to remember. It means that you've got 4th jhana and everything else right inside of you right now. It's there. You just need to allow the petals to open up. And the deeper you go, the more beautiful it gets, the more fun it gets. You don't know how gorgeous it is inside. No matter how old you are, how sick you are, so how difficult your life has been. Still, those petals inside haven't been touched by those things. They're gorgeous. And just how you understand just, how to get right deep inside of yourself. How simple it is and how gorgeous. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Oh, I enjoyed that.